The Doklam standoff is in its 40th day today with no sight of resolution. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval travels to Beijing in a couple of days. Will he be able to resolve this face-off? Will he get a standalone meeting with his Chinese counterpart? And just before this crucial visit, the Global Times called Mr. Doval a schemer. Why is India so unusually restrained in its response to such war rhetoric, not just from their official media in China, but also from official spokespersons in China? Is it time to get ready for the long haul in Doklam? The India-China face-off is our face-off tonight. China ratchets up the rhetoric once again as National Security Advisor Ajit Doval is all set to leave for Beijing. The Chinese government mouthpiece terms Doval a schemer, stresses on India's unconditional withdrawal from Doklam. But reports from the ground say Indian troops have dug in their heels for the long haul. And we'll be joined by an elite panel of defense and security experts. We've taken a conscious decision to keep the politicians out of this panel. Jaidev Ranade is President, Center for China Analysis and Strategy. Phunchuk Stobdan is former ambassador and an expert on inter-Asian affairs. Lieutenant General retired V.S. Jaswal is former Army Commander of the Northern Command. Subir Bhaumik, veteran journalist, in fact, one of the few who's actually gone to this face-off point and written a very elaborate article on what he saw on the Indian side of this face-off point. He'll be joining us on our panel tonight. Aina Tangan, political affairs commentator, will be joining us from Beijing tonight. And Brahma Chalani, strategic affairs expert, also joining us from Delhi tonight. While that's our big focus, we'll get to our debate and to our debaters in just a couple of minutes. Here are the other headlines that we're tracking this Tuesday evening on Face Off. It's monsoon mayhem in Maximum City, Mumbai. Civic apathy in your face yet again as a four-storied building collapses in Ghatkopar. This amid BMC passing the buck in blame games on potholes across some key roads in the city. Ramnath Kovind is sworn in as the 14th President of India. Plurality and togetherness and his humble origins are the focus of Kovind's inaugural address in Parliament's Central Hall. Torrential rains in Rajasthan and Gujarat raise flood havoc. High alert is sounded as over 25,000 people are evacuated in Gujarat. The Army, Air Force and NDRF teams are called in. The Prime Minister holds emergency meetings, undertakes an aerial survey of the flood-hit areas. No Hindi, a separate flag, and now the demand for a separate Lingayat religion. The Congress government in Karnataka goes all out on a divide and rule strategy ahead of next year's assembly elections. But up first, it's a full 40 days today into the India-China standoff in Doklam. And through it all, not once have we come across a statement or some kind of action that could potentially open a window towards a temporary resolution. Almost every single day, Beijing, either directly through its official spokespersons or through its mouthpiece, the Global Times, only looks to ratchet up tensions with a precondition that India must unilaterally withdraw. On its part, India has stood its ground, refusing to give in to China's bullying tactics. All of this makes the visit of National Security Advisor Ajit Doval to Beijing starting Thursday all that more critical. Will he be able to find a thaw? First the story, and then we'll get to the debate.
All eyes, all hopes pinned here. Because National Security Advisor Ajit Doval's China visit starting tomorrow, his meeting with his Chinese counterpart is the only visible hope of the two sides even beginning to lay the groundwork for a climb down. Because on that India-China-Bhutan tri-junction at Doklam, the heat builds to dangerous levels, fanned by mudslinging and chest-thumping and saber-rattling rhetoric through official channels in Beijing. Sample this. For the nth time since the standoff began 40 days ago, the dragon spews venom again through the Global Times newspaper, its official mouthpiece. Ajit Doval termed the schemer, the unconditional withdrawal demand stressed and re-stressed 8 times in the piece. This paper rules out Doval's visit as an opportunity to settle the standoff, harping on instead about New Delhi correcting its mistakes, giving up its illusions, rounding off with a much-repeated threat that the PLA is capable of actions that India cannot afford, that New Delhi will have to pay a heavy price. India's call for a status quo has fallen on deaf ears, even amid reports of back-channel talks only a bullying diplomacy echoes.
The
Indian border troops have illegally trespassed on Chinese territory, and we hereby once again ask India to pull back Indian border troops to the Indian side of the boundary. I want to stress again that this is a precondition for any meaningful talks between the two sides.
Then India's stand, spelt out as no giving in. No question of giving in to an aggressor's demands, upholding a moral high stand on the basis of laid down India-China treaties. Indian journalist Subir Bhaumik reports from the ground in the South China Morning Post, saying dozens of Indian military convoys are heading towards Doklam. Artillery is being moved in. A stone's throw from ground zero, new bunkers are being built. Steps are being taken to preempt any Chinese military action. Battle drills are on. Everywhere, a readiness that suggests we're in this for the long haul. We won't provoke, but we're ready to respond. The guiding mantra. India-China, the tension hasn't hit such a peak for this long since the War of 1962. With Doval, the focus shifts to Beijing now. China has reminded India of 1962's loss several times, but the Indian army this time is in no mood to back down. Are we in it for the long haul? That's the debate tonight on Face Off at 9.
All right, will the NSA meet lead to a thaw, or should we now get ready for the long haul in this Doklam standoff? Joining us on our panel tonight, Jaidev Ranade is President, the Center for China Analysis and Strategy. Phunchuk Stobdan is former ambassador and expert on Inter-Asian affairs. Lieutenant General retired B.S. Jaswal, former Army Commander of the Northern Command. Subir Bhaumik, senior journalist and the only journalist, in fact, from India who's gone all the way up to that tri-junction point where this face-off has been going on for the last 40 days. Aina Tangan, political affairs commentator, joining us via Skype from Beijing tonight. And Brahma Chalani, strategic affairs expert. Let me start with you, Subir Bhaumik, because you're one of the only, if not the only, Indian journalist who's gone right up to that tri-junction point where this face-off has been going on. Tell us what you saw there. And some of it you've mentioned in your article as well for the South China Morning Post. How is that in keeping with the restraint that we're seeing from New Delhi when it comes to public statements?
Well, the policy clearly is to be restrained, but to be very firm and not to back down and to blink. Yeah, the preparations are on in full swing. Nobody is prepared to take a chance on the Indian side. The Indian Army is a professional organization. They know that the Chinese are trying their bullying tactics. They also know that the military exercises that happened in Tibet has been played up by the Chinese media as part of their Sai War. There's nothing particular about this. You know, during monsoon and during winter, these kind of exercises happen. But the fact that the Chinese have tried to use these exercises as some kind of a point to pressurize India proves that they are definitely in a very aggressive mood. So the mantra on the Indian side is, we don't get into a firefight, we don't even get into a scuffle unless it's absolutely necessary.
Fair enough. What did you see? What did you see? I'm interested, Subir Bhaumik. What did you see? Did you see convoys moving? Did you see weapons being moved? Did you see bunkers being dug up? What did you see?
Yes, bunkers being dug up, additional fortifications being made, machine gun nests being led. I also understand that some of the possible approaches that might be used by the Chinese in this area, in the Chumbi Valley area, have also been mined. But my own military sense, and having talked to people, is that this is one part of the border where the Indians definitely have the TNT advantage, which is the terrain and tactical advantage. We are on higher ground, much of the area, of Chumbi Valley, and therefore if the Chinese tried something here, they are in for a lot of trouble. They are not going to get away very easily. And Zakka, if you recall, after 5 years after the 62 war, when there was this massive artillery duel in Nathula in 1967, the Chinese didn't fare very well as then. And also the fact that the Chinese army and the PLA, when it has tried to punish somebody, 1979 Vietnam experience comes to mind, the idea would be to draw them in and then hit them very hard. So the Indian army definitely is prepared. You can see convoys going up, you can see reinforcements being made. The tank, the heavy armor obviously moves by night to avoid public attention. But the fact is that the mood is very clear. We are not going to back down, and also because India has treaty obligations with Bhutan.
So let me get Brahma Chalani into the conversation, because let me get Brahma Chalani into the conversation. Now, how do you square off what Subir Bhaumik just described about movement of artillery, movement of troops, reinforcements, soldiers there digging in bunkers? Now we know on the diplomatic front, the National Security Advisor is going to Beijing in a couple of days. I don't know, and we have no clarity from either side whether there will be a separate standalone between him and his Chinese counterpart. If such a meeting were not to happen, how much of an embarrassment would that be, and how much of a lost opportunity would that be?
There would be talks, but not formal talks, because the Chinese have turned this into a prestige issue. There will be talks. There will be talks that will be conducted informally, quietly. So we will have to wait and see whether the Chinese are willing to relax, because they have painted themselves in a corner diplomatically by setting absurd preconditions. And militarily, they're not in a position to dislodge the Indian troops from Doklam Plateau. If they were to attack India in that Tri-Junction area, the PLA would really get a bloody nose. So this is the wrong area for them to attack India. They might try to open a front elsewhere, but certainly not in the Chumbi Valley area. So diplomatically and militarily, they're not in a position to emerge as a winner from this confrontation. And they need a face saver. The Indians want to ensure that no new threat emerges to India's chicken neck. And as far as Bhutan is concerned, its interest is to uphold its territorial integrity. Now, these three separate interests can be met through a simple formula that calls for India and China both to mutually withdraw troops from Doklam Plateau. That will restore status quo ante and also enable China to stay safe.
All right, fair enough. Jaidev Ranade, how do you then, 2 days before the NSA goes to Beijing for this meet, for this BRICS NSA meet, you have the Global Times editorial today calling Mr. Doval a schemer of the Doklam crisis. Last week, the same newspaper in another editorial called Sushma Swaraj a liar. I mean, how should India respond to this? And so far, we've found no official response from the MEA. Why is India so restrained in the face of such acerbic commentary that's coming in from the Chinese official media?
I think there are 3 points here that we need to look at. The first, to answer your question, why is India so restrained? I think it's showing quiet confidence in its position and in its assertion of its security interests. Second, as far as the Chinese are concerned, they have made very wild allegations and threats against India, indicating very clearly that they are not going to be sensitive to India's concerns, and also revealing the thinking of the upper echelons of the Chinese leadership about India. Otherwise, they would not have made statements about reversing their position on Sikkim, about reviving the insurgency in the northeast, sending troops to Kashmir, etc. All these, mind you, have been made by state-owned media like the Global Times, and statements about war by their consul general in Mumbai. So they have made these statements. I think these statements are going to remain in the background and have given a jolt or damaged Sino-Indian relations over the long term.
No, but why aren't we responding to it? No, Jaidev Ranade, why aren't we responding? Imagine, instead of Global Times, right, instead of China, let's say official media in Pakistan, let's say PTV, said these things of the Indian Foreign Minister and the Indian National Security Advisor, we would have had war breaking out from television studios by now. Why aren't we seeing the same kind of rhetoric with the Chinese?
Well, I think firstly there are two large countries involved here, China and India. And in my estimation, I think we are being very sensible. We are still indicating that we are looking for a diplomatic solution. By entering into a, as you call it, a tutu mai mai with the Chinese, all we are going to do is further narrow the scope for diplomatic maneuvering. So I think this is a very sound policy. And as far as Ajit Doval is concerned, his visit to Beijing, I think it's up in the air. We don't know what's really going to happen. But whatever does, I don't see India pulling back. In fact, I would say that China has much more to lose. Already their image has been dented. They style themselves as a big regional power whom no one wants to challenge, but they are being challenged.
No. The Global Times calls India's foreign minister a liar, but Aina Tangen, today we had the first comment from the Chinese foreign minister Wang Yi, and this is what he said, and I quote, "The rights and wrongs are very clear, and even senior Indian officials have openly stated that Chinese troops did not enter into Indian territory." No Indian official has said this. This is a lie. And I'm calling out the Chinese foreign minister for lying. No Indian official has said or openly stated, as Wang Yi says, that Chinese troops did not enter into Indian territory. Why is the foreign minister of China lying?
Quite frankly, when are the assertion that Chinese troops entered into Indian territory? This has been about on the 16th of June, from my understanding, and I think from the world, that Indian troops entered into Bhutan. And
that's the best case scenario. China says they entered into Chinese territory. So when are you saying that Chinese troops actually entered into India? This has not been part of the narrative, something new. You're free to kind of ratchet up the rhetoric towards a warlike statement.
No, this is not what Einar, this is not what I'm saying. This is not what I'm saying. This is what Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China, has said. Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China, has said this.
He's saying that there has been no indication whatsoever from the Indian side that Chinese troops entered into India. Are you saying that he's lying? And if he is, are you saying that Chinese troops did cross the border at Sikkim, or Dokam, however you want to call it? Are you saying that?
Okay, let me read out the quote again. Okay, let me read out the quote again.
No,
this is what let me read out the quote again.
He's lying about that.
He's lying about the fact that he said that even senior Indian officials have openly stated that Chinese troops did not enter into Indian territory. No Indian official has said this. That's a lie. And tomorrow, hang on.
I don't understand your question. Are you saying that Indian troops entered into China?
All I'm asking you is, on what basis is the Chinese foreign minister making this assertion that even senior Indian officials have admitted? No senior Indian official has said anything to this effect.
I'm not privy, and I don't think you are either, to any conversations that he has had in private with Indian officials. And I don't think to this date that anybody has said that Chinese soldiers entered into India.
So let me put a larger question. No, hang on. One second. Let me put a
larger question.
No, there is a larger question.
Are you saying
there is a larger question? Let me ask my larger question. Einar, let me ask my larger question. My larger question is this. Today the Global Times called, last week the Global Times called the Indian foreign minister a liar. Today here on a mainstream Indian channel, if I call the foreign minister of China a liar, would you expect the same kind of restraint from China?
I have no idea what their position is, because I have no idea what your point is. If you want to say that he's a liar, it's just a statement. I can't argue with you. That's the way you feel about it. But ratcheting up the rhetoric, trying to call each other liars, trying to say that the Global Times is the official mouthpiece of China, that is wrong. It is not the official. Go to People's Daily. Go to Xinhua. These are not the official groups. Everybody knows that this is a publication that speaks out very fervently from the right wing. So if you want to say what the right wing of Indian media is saying, and saying that is the official declaration.
Well, hang on. I mean, leave aside the media. I mean, look at what the defense ministry spokesperson said yesterday in Beijing. Anyway, I don't want to get into this rhetoric of who said what. But Funchuk Stobdan, hang on. The larger point is this:
who entered which territory?
No, yeah. Hang on. The larger point is this: that
You don't want to hang on?
the
I mean, you
narrative.
don't want
No,
to discuss
one second. The narrative is, and this is what the Chinese have been attempting to tell the international community. The narrative that they're peddling is that it is India that is trespassed into Chinese territory. The truth is, and the facts on the ground are, it is the Chinese who try to alter the status quo in disputed territory between China and Bhutan. And because there is a treaty obligation between India and Bhutan. Hang on, Einar, 1 second. My question's to Ambassador Stobdan. Because India is treaty bound to protect Bhutan and its interests, that's how the Indian troops got involved. But why is this narrative not the prevalent and dominant narrative in the international community? Everybody seems to be buying the Chinese narrative, Ambassador.
Well, quite frankly, you're right.
No, Ambassador Stobdan. Ambassador Stobdan. Einar, I'll come to you. Einar, I'll come to you. Ambassador Stobdan. That question was to Ambassador Stobdan. That question was to Ambassador Stobdan, please.
By China.
Ambassador Stobdan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I think from the 1st or 2nd of July onwards, they've been heavily engaged in the psychological game. It's a divisive game. If you recall, they were trying to divide between the ruling party in the government and the opposition parties. Then it started that they must differentiate between various bureaucratic wings. They said foreign secretary is sensible. Now today they are saying NSA is a schemer. And then they said the foreign minister Sushma Swaraj is a liar. And today they are saying somebody has admitted that the things are like that. Indian officials are. So they are trying to create. While I was in China last week, they said your prime minister is very good, but his advisors are stupid. And he said he has been advised by wrong people and a wrong think tank. And then he said, Ambassador Stobdan, you are a very seasoned diplomat and a scholar. Why have you come with this delegation? So see, they are trying to play all sorts of game. This is the game which probably, I don't know, from the Qing dynasty they've been playing all this game. I don't know what formula now they're applying here. While they may be preparing for something else, but they are engaging us into some kind of a psychological game. And I think we should not fall in their lap like this. We should stand united when it comes to such a critical situation. I think everybody is together. And they will continue to do like this. And even today, if you saw the media, Global Times said that NSA cannot discuss bilateral issues in a multilateral forum.
Yeah.
And another paper says NSA's visit to Beijing is a hope, and India should spell out its whatever details that you want to have with the Chinese and remove the standoff. So again, they are sending lots of mixed signals, and I think this is a very deliberate thing. I know there are a lot of things happening within China. The PLA is not happy about what's happening. On 2-3 grounds, there are a lot of problems within China. A, it is about the corruption, anti-corruption campaign which Xi Jinping has launched. And as a result, you saw last week, they purged one of the senior most, I think it's for the first time, a serving Politburo member has been removed from the office. And secondly, it is all about Belt and Road. Belt and Road. Not everybody is not everybody is on one agreement that Belt and Road is a good idea for China.
Okay.
Secondly, there are a lot of differences on North Korea. So I think these are all games. The PLA, if you recall, in Chumar they were doing their own, and Xi Jinping was in Gujarat. So I think things are not, and I think it's very, very clearly told to me, at least in a private conversation, that our leader is not so strong as your prime minister in your country.
All right.
So therefore, one could see, the PLA has been engaged somewhere in the drill in Tibetan Plateau, but the aim could be something else. It could not be just, just India-centric.
Okay. Let me also bring in General Jaswal. I mean, some experts seem to suggest that part of the reason why we are seeing this kind of belligerence from the Chinese in Doklam is because of the increased investments as well as infrastructure building that India has undertaken in the northeast. I just want to run through this. The BRO, today's papers carried this, the Border Roads Organization has said that they will construct 2 tunnels in Arunachal to cut the distance right up to the border, to the line of actual control, by at least a good 10 kilometers. There's a bridge capable of carrying 60-ton battle tanks that was inaugurated in Assam just a few weeks ago by the Prime Minister. In October of last year, a decision was taken to deploy the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile in the eastern sector. 120,000 Indian troops have been deployed in the eastern sector since 2011. There's a massive expansion plan there. There's already a mountain strike corps of, I think, 60,000 strong. Is all of this, from whatever we've been seeing over the last few years, whether it was Depsang in 2013, Chumar in 2014, or now Doklam in 2017, is it the Chinese responding to India's increased infrastructure build-up on our side of the line of actual control?
No, I don't think so that they are trying to respond, because they are way ahead of us in any case as far as infrastructure development is concerned. Let me give you the rationale of why they're behaving this way. It was a misconception on their part when they came into Doklam. They thought that they will be able to, Bhutan will not be able to contest, and unilaterally they'll be able to change the status quo. But India stepped in as per Article 2 of our agreement of 2007. Now there is a face-off, there is a situation. Now how does China get out of that situation? Because it's been checkmated over there. So that's the reason all the rhetoric started off. And it is typical and innate part of their strategy to impose psychological warfare on the enemy as part of Sun Tzu's strategy and force him to back off. Now India, I think, is behaving very maturely, that we are not getting into rhetorics at all, because we know our strength. Infrastructure, development, etc., etc. Well, we are doing it as a prophylactic, strategy, so that we are not taken by surprise. But that is not the issue why this rhetoric has gone up. The rhetoric is that they took a wrong step. They did not consider the reaction of India. Today, their main strategy is economics. They cannot afford to meddle around with India, because even the regional comprehensive economic partnership is coming up now shortly. And India is a very, very important country in that. And FTA, which was there, wherein Japan walked out, they went in with South Korea, but they lost a lot of economic window. So they will not get into anything. Now as a face saver, they are trying to be a bully on us, and which we are not taking it. They cannot afford to go in for war at all, because the terrain is in our, the terrain friction is our favor, and the troop density is hell of a lot.
There is a growing sort of
so rhetoric is the only way. If you back off,
there is a growing feeling, Brahmachalani, that one of the reasons that India needs to leverage more is trade with China. We trade about $75 billion, much of it in favor of the Chinese. Is that even a plausible strategy, if I may?
It is clearly. Had China been in India's place, they would have used a trade weapon as their weapon of choice. Look at how China is using trade as a weapon against South Korea currently, how they used trade as a weapon against Mongolia last November, after Mongolia invited the Dalai Lama. They have a history of using weapons against countries in Asia and even against Norway, when the Nobel Peace Prize was given in 2010. So they have flouted WTO rules, they have flouted international law, they have weaponized trade in a blatant manner. And in the case of India, they're reaping nearly $60 billion profit through trade annually. And at the same time, they're trying to contain India from different flanks. And India is so reluctant to use trade as a source of leverage vis-a-vis China. There's no reason for India to shy away from using trade.
Einar, I mean, look at the examples that Brahmachalani gave. I mean, when Liu Xiaobo was given the Nobel Peace Prize, the Chinese banned the import of Norwegian salmon. When the flare-up happened with the Philippines, the Chinese banned the import of bananas from the Philippines. Tomorrow, if India says we're going to ban the import of, let's say, manufactured goods from China, and the trade is so heavily stacked in favor of China, that would be a much bigger blow than whatever we've seen in Doklam over the last 40 days.
Well, China's international trade exports are $2.34 trillion. The trade with India is important, but it's less than a rounding error in terms of its international trade. I think the jingoistic rationalizations, passive-aggressive, whatever they may be, will not change the fact that Indian troops crossed over an international border. They say to aid an ally. It's not clear because the damage was not filed until 14 days later. So it's not clear exactly what it is. India continues to be isolated on this issue. You can say it's psychological games, but the Chinese could claim the same. So at this point, the question is, what does India have to gain from this continued standoff and these kind of antics? Wouldn't it be better to withdraw the troops and demand that there be negotiations that allow both sides,
Jaidev Ranade, do you feel like Einar Tangen said India is isolated on this? This issue was raised in Parliament as well, where some members of Parliament said, why is it that our strategic partners, our friends, US, UK, France, etc., why are they not publicly taking India's side on this? I want you to respond to Einar Tangen.
They don't have to take... I don't think they have to take India's side as such. There are negotiations that are going on, there are discussions that are taking place. But here I'd like to make two statements. Firstly, what the gentleman just said earlier, Mr. Tangen, is a clear Chinese line. I don't blame him, he's sitting in Beijing properly. But there are 2 points here. Firstly, it is the Chinese who've intruded into Bhutan. This is not the first time, and they have begun building the road. They created a dispute over the Doklam Plateau, and now they're calling it, in fact, insisting on calling it Chinese territory. That is why they say that they have come in, and that India has entered into Chinese territory, because they are claiming Doklam. The fact is that they have intruded into Doklam. We have gone there at the behest of Bhutan to assist Bhutan. There is a 3.7 million square kilometer bully who is bullying a country which is 23,000 square kilometers with very limited resources. We have gone there to back them, and I think what is hurting China are 2 things. One, that their plans have been stymied. Second, that the image that they have built up of themselves as this great invincible regional power whom people are reluctant to challenge, whom people are reluctant to confront, is being challenged by a country which they never thought would do so.
Einar,
so I think
Einar, you want to quickly respond?
A multiplicity of factors here which are at play.
Quite frankly, if you want, my learned colleague can, I think, admit that there are differing interpretations of various colonial, very old agreements between the English, who were trying to pursue economic gains at the expense of historical lines. That there were never borders between China and India until these kind of agreements were created, and that therefore to say that there is a actual understanding of all of this stuff is not true. So when you go forward, if my learned colleague can go to one of these places and turn over a rock that says this belongs to China, this belongs to Bhutan, or this belongs to India, I would welcome that. But the truth is, he can't. So in these types of disputes, the question is, are you going to try to settle them in the civilized way by sitting down at the conference table, by saying that we protest, or are you going to send in troops? And this is the question that India has to answer.
Again, you are completely omitting the fact that the reason why this face-off started is because the Chinese started building a road, changing the status quo. But I want to move on to another story. No, hang on, to another story that came out today, and this is from the south, from Sri Lanka, where the Hambantota port deal has now been cleared. It was hanging fire for the last couple of years. This was something that was initially brought up when Rajapaksa was president with the Chinese There were calls of sellout to the Chinese, both domestically within Sri Lanka, and there were military concerns expressed by India. For 2 years after there was elections in Sri Lanka and a new government under Sirisena and Ranil Wickremesinghe came to power, for 2 years this deal was virtually in the cold storage. But now, Ambassador Stobdan, they have cleared this deal, although with changed sort of clauses. So the Chinese will have less of a military role and explicitly only a commercial role in this Hambantota deal. But it just shows that, you know, in the face of this kind of huge money the Chinese and Chinese state-owned enterprises are putting into our neighboring countries, Hambantota being part of the famous One Belt, One Road as well, how does India counter this?
I heard they started using the terminology instead of belt and road. In Sri Lanka now they are saying zones, economic zones or something like that. So they are again confusing in the Indian Ocean. They are calling something else, not maritime Silk Route. I agree now this issue about Hambantota revised agreement that has been signed yesterday or day before into 60-40 kind of arrangement. The point here is that Hambantota is certainly not suitable for any commercial shipping purposes. It's purely for military purposes. And therefore, they are trying to send a signal now. Look, if you threaten our sea lines in the Indian Ocean, I think we need to be very, very careful now. We have to watch out in the Andaman Nicobar because in the excuse that they find that Malacca Strait is going to be threatened, our security is threatened, so we want to take this action and occupy some islands in the Nicobar areas. So I think we have to be very careful. And I think here the Doklam Plateau is not so much of an issue. Their target would be Tawang. So we have to watch out. You know, there could be a diversion militarily on the Doklam Plateau, but their eyes are in Tawang.
General
and they have warned before also.
You think that's a possibility? I mean, given militarily, like you said, how the Chinese are at a disadvantage in Doklam, they could, to spring a surprise, attack some other part of the line of actual control where they seem to have the territorial and tactical advantage?
For heaven's sake, please understand one thing. Today's army is not the 62 army. Our troop-to-ground density in Tawang area, which is ahead of it, right up to Bumla, and the line, Tulungla, Bumla, and Zimithang, well, we are very strong over there. And there is a lot of terrain friction. And to dream of Tawang means a major conflict. China is definitely not going in for a major conflict. It could just go in for posturing or nibbling action. We must understand that this particular, they put their foot in their mouth. They never expected a reaction from India. Now that India has come in over there, and even if you go back to the Treaty of 1890, it says the highest watershed. I've walked in that area every inch as a youngster. The highest watershed in that area is the Batangla Sinchanla. How come they are looking at this place, Gemushin? That is like this, not horizontal. So now they were not expecting anything, and we have had a treaty with them in 2012 that should there be a tri-junction issue anywhere, the third country will be consulted. They did not. They wanted to change it unilaterally.
All right.
And now when India has reacted over there, they have resorted to rhetorics and to psychological warfare. Larger issue of war, full war, all-out war. I don't think that is a possibility.
No
question.
Let me get.
Because China wants to first grow economically.
Let me get some closing comments. I'll go back to where we started, the meeting of NSA Dole, the visit to Beijing. Subir Bhaumek, do you reckon that this will get resolved? They'll be able to find some kind of a temporary truce in that meeting? And if they don't, then what are we looking at? Are we looking at possibly this stretching up to the winter months?
I don't think there is going to be any solution during Doval Saab's visit, for the very simple reason that the Chinese have very clear aims here. They are trying to tell Bhutan who is the boss in this Himalayas, and therefore they are not going to allow any kind of a thing. See, they are very, very clear about the fact that they are trying to tell Bhutan, you have to deal with us, you can't sort of just depend on India.
Okay.
And therefore, this intrusion is fairly clearly aimed at proving that. Now that India is standing its ground, they are saying that we are going to discuss this whole thing only if the Indians pull back.
All right.
Some of the military officers in Doklam are very clear. At Lalten, they're very clear. Moment we pull back, they will build the road, and the terrain and tactical advantage that we have in this sector is gone. That's definitely something the Indians will not allow.
All right.
That's not something Mr. Doval will concede. I don't see anything happening soon.
I'll get a final comment
Anything
from.
happening
I'll get
anywhere
a
soon.
final comment.
Another thing, let me tell you, Zakka.
All right, I've got to really wrap up. Final comment, 30 seconds from Brahmachalani. If this doesn't get resolved in Mr. Doval's trip to Beijing, and we're looking at the long haul, where does this leave the Bhutanese? They're in a very, very difficult place, caught between India and China. This is happening on territory that they claim. And they've got elections coming up next year.
Exactly. The first thing we have to bear in mind that China has emerged as a potent long-term challenge for India.
Mm-hmm.
India has to devise a long-term strategy to counter an increasingly muscular China. Doklam could well be the defining moment for India. How India emerges from the Doklam standoff will very much shape the future trajectory in the region. If India emerges with its honor intact, it will be very good for India in terms of asserting its interests in the region and also ensuring that countries like Nepal and Bhutan and Sri Lanka do not fall in the Chinese lap.
All right. Okay.
But I think it also, if I could just make one point quickly, which is that the Doklam standoff has also underscored the deficiencies on India's part. For example, India's poor PR and media outreach, India's inability to immediately counter China's intense psychological warfare. Every episode is a learning experience.
Yeah.
For India, the Doklam standoff offers important, sobering lessons.
I wish folks in the external publicity department in the MEA are paying attention to this. I think they've made all of 2 statements in the last 40 days, 2, maybe 3, and then we had 1 statement from the minister in Parliament. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up at that. We'll see. We'll be on top of the NSA's visit to Beijing. I want to thank all my panelists for joining us, and some of them will be back on our show as well as we track Mr. Doval's visit to Beijing. Can he crack this standoff that's been going on for the last 40 days? Will there be any kind of a temporary truce that he can find along with his counterpart in China? Or are we now looking at possibly the long haul in Doklam? Quick break here in the program. When we come back, it certainly seems to be the long haul for Mumbaikars. Another monsoon season. It's the same old story. Yet another old building collapses. This time 10 people are dead. This happens at a 4-story building in Ghatkopar early this morning. The BMC going back to doing what it does best. It just passes the buck. We'll be live with our very own Bhupendra Chaubey on the other side of this break. Welcome back. The BMC's inefficiency in administration has once again come to light in Mumbai after a 4-story building collapsed this morning, leaving at least 12 people dead. Rescue work continues with several residents still trapped under the debris. Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis is at the site of the collapse. He's there to review the situation. Let's go straight across to our executive editor, Bhupendra Chaubey, who's joining us live from the collapse site. What is Devendra Fadnavis saying? I mean, who's going to take responsibility for the 12 people who've died?
Well, that's the big question, that who at the end of the day is going to be held accountable within the bureaucracy, within the political establishment. The Chief Minister is here. He spent roughly 5 minutes, 10 people dead, 20 injured, and rescue work is still going on, and the Chief Minister's come here for exactly 5 minutes. I can well understand that maybe Mr. Fadnavis doesn't want to be in a situation where, because of VVIP movement, the relief and rescue work gets hampered. But it does tell you something, that not one single Shiv Sena leader, barring the BMC chairperson, barring the Mumbai mayor, who came here in the first half of the day, no one else has come. The man whose private clinic was here at this very spot where this building used to exist, and it came collapsing like a pack of cards, Mr. Sunil Sitap has disappeared off the face of the earth. No one knows where he is. The BJP MLA from this area, Mr. Ram Kadam, who described himself as this dashing MLA from this constituency, has also disappeared. He's nowhere to be seen. And the Chief Minister has come simply, perhaps in an act of political tokenism, many would say, to try and give this sense to everybody that he wants to give justice to people, that he will conduct a thorough inquiry. $1 million question is still not being answered. Who within the political class and the bureaucratic class will ultimately be held responsible for the loss of over 10 lives and injuries to many others?
All right, and Bhupen Chaubey will be live with us for a special edition of Viewpoint, live from that building collapse site in Ghatkopar in Mumbai. That's coming up right after this show at 9:55 p.m. And finally, as we wrap up Face Off this Tuesday night edition, Network 18 is proud to be associated with Tata Tea for the Alarm Bajne Se Pehle Jago Re campaign. The campaign is calling for a change of mindset on how we tackle and react to issues related to women's safety in our cities. We urge you to support this campaign by signing a petition on jagore.com to make gender sensitivity compulsory in schools so that children can help build a gender-sensitive and gender-equitable environment. Thanks for tuning in to Face Off. We'll catch you again, same time tomorrow night. Good night.